It's been a bad 3 weeks for ASUS between the trying to buy media positivity comment with advertising, the motherboard problems, the taking away of the warranty, Jay's 2 cents dropping them as an advertiser, and all of the other issues. But things are finally starting to look up for consumers. It just took a lot of a big fight to get ASUS to where it needs to be. And today we're updating you on all of it. This will probably be our final entry on this matter. We're going to walk you through start to finish of what ASUS was saying, how the statements changed, and we've requested a lawyer join us on camera. So we actually reached out to an attorney and brought him on the show to use this as an opportunity for all of us, including us at GN, to learn about consumer rights and provide some consumer protection education relating to ASUS's warranty statements. But we need to walk through the rest of it first, such as when media outlet Kit Guru said that ASUS PR was posting comments on its videos, apparently around 30 or more, some of which included commentary relating to buying positivity from media outlets with advertising dollars. And before anyone uses the rogue employee claim, we would ask, how many rogue employees do you need before you have actually just a company culture problem, which is what we think is going on within ASUS. Now though, ASUS has provided a final round of responses. They appear to be much better for you all, and it looks like the company's gotten the point at least, even if it took some effort. So let's go through it. We brought you this video with store.gamersnexus.net and our 15-year anniversary limited foil shirt. We expect to run out within the next week and will not be making another run of these. Our goal is to bring more journalism to PC hardware, and that's funded largely by our audience, and this year has been bigger than ever for that. Our 15-year shirt has supported many of our recent efforts, such as the introduction of the Gamers.Nexus hardware failure list. The front features a vibrant, bright blue foil mixed with a gold 15, plus some green accents for GPU components. The back of the shirt has a subscriber graph starting in 2008 when we launched the website, and it moves towards 2 million now. Grab one of these shirts before they're gone and support our interviews with experts like this one by going to store.gamersnexus.net. First of all, this absolutely has to be addressed to the comment that Kit Guru made about its experiences with ASUS and the media positivity remarks. So we found this deeply troubling and concerning because if the culture within ASUS is cultivating the mindset that advertising is in fact purchasing of power or positivity, then ASUS must become persona non grata as an advertiser within the industry, because that mentality is toxic. And if there is a power imbalance, which there often is, where the media publication does not know that the advertiser thinks it's buying positivity, that's how you get conflict. And that's how you get either a conformity from the outlet, which if the outlet is perhaps in a more tenuous position financially, if it's less experienced, certainly for those of you watching who are maybe new to the space and starting to try and build your own coverage or media coverage of computer hardware, that's the type of company you have to be careful of, because it is a poisonous mentality that will taint how you build your brand, and you have to stay away from that because there is this sort of implicit understanding, at least for ASUS, where they are buying positivity, and that's what we found very concerning. So based on these remarks to Kit Guru, it may be ASUS's belief that sponsorship nets an unspoken assumption of positivity around its product. And if the outlet then acts against that unshared belief from ASUS, including if the outlet is unaware of that belief, they may risk a form of retribution from ASUS without understanding why, and that could come in many types. One of them might be more implicit or between the lines, like cutting off of sampling for an outlet that simply can't afford to buy all the products. The last time we worked with ASUS on ads was several years ago at this point, and the biggest thing that changed there was the person. So our point of contact switched out. The individual we worked with went to a different company, and the guy who used to handle it that we worked with at ASUS was phenomenal. And you know who you are, so if you're watching, then we miss you at ASUS, because this particular contact really understood the relationship between media as an independent force and ASUS as both a manufacturer and an advertiser. And that's what's really important, is when the contact, the individual managing the relationship, understands how critical it is to maintain a separation of editorial commentary and advertising money. And we don't know what ASUS is like internally anywhere, because we haven't tried to sell ads to them since that person left. And this for us is enough to say, actually, we completely agree with Jay's commentary, which was made before Kit Guru's post went up, that cutting ASUS off from sponsorships is the right move until a time at which it becomes apparent that they do not hold these beliefs at a more corporate level, because you can't necessarily blame the individual PR rep if it has been ingrained to them, perhaps outside of official training documents and purely through words, that this is how buying ads works. And it's not the only thing ASUS has done that's kind of shady. I mean, besides being indicative of maybe what its marketing directors believe, ASUS has also done things like trying to make us sign NDAs after we've flown across the world, like actually across the world 24 hours, to see a product that we already agreed to see, which is not, that's a massive power imbalance. You've effectively taken the person hostage because you've recruited them to come to this unveil event. We pay for all of our own flights and travel for these things. And then once they're there standing in front of you after 24 hours of travel and a lot of money invested, you say, sign this document right here, right now, so we can go see the product, which is bad because even if NDAs are mostly boilerplate, and we're going to get to that later, the problem is the position of duress that the company puts you in, where it is saying, no, you do not have time to consult the lawyer, who's on a different time zone, by the way, if there is something disagreeable in this contract. And also, if you don't agree to this contract because it is different than what maybe was suggested or understood from the email chain, then deal with it. Now, when that happened, we actually walked out, and they came running after us, said, never mind, forget it, you can come see it, do whatever you want, and then we proceeded with it. But the reason I bring this up is because it aligns with some of these other statements that have come out from media recently, and that was handled by an entirely different person. And finally, on the media topic, Hardware Busters and Eris over there, who's the reviewer we respect greatly. He's one of the original power supply reviewers alongside Johnny Guru back in the day, and he still does it. But he posted about ASUS's treatment of him as a reviewer as opposed to as an influential key person, an influencer in other words. And he called it, quote, "This is the craziest thing I've heard in my entire career." And we agree with him on that commentary as well. But you can check out Hardware Busters International for that. So the point is, ASUS has a problem internally with its culture and how it views media as an extension of its marketing arm, and we hope that changes. The statements they've made today are going in the right direction for the consumer. And hopefully, with this entry in our coverage, PR can watch it, objectively look at the matter and go, yes, I can understand how the power imbalance here between ASUS, a company whose revenue is nearing $20 billion annually, is perceived as perhaps controlling over small media outlets, especially when it makes statements about an implicit purchasing of positivity. So ASUS, please change in that regard. Okay, so we need to walk you through the chain of statements in chronological order. The first statement that ASUS made following our videos was to Linus Media Group. It was not talking to us directly at that time, and instead released one through Linus's team. Linus stated these comments on the WAN show, some as paraphrased, some as what appeared to be direct quotes. And one of the statements that ASUS made via Linus Tech Tips and team was that it was so focused on preventing users from continuing to damage their boards that the implication here is they didn't think about that voiding warranty language or didn't notice it, or something along those lines. And we found this language to be a curious dodging of responsibility by ASUS. Now, in that video, it was suggested that a company like ASUS might just take care of you, but we have an inbox absolutely full of customers who have not been taken care of by ASUS, and this isn't just recently. This is all kinds of RMA issues. So this is why our original point, and one that we've made repeatedly now, is that clear, definitive language needs to be present in policies like these. And oddly, in ASUS's case, the language was clear and definitive. It's just that the language said, "F you." But at least they were clear about their intentions. It just wasn't a good policy. Now, ASUS claims via LTT that, quoting LTT here, they don't intend to communicate that they won't respect users' warranties. And if that were the case, then perhaps they should not have communicated that in the manner which they did. We also saw some points presented that ASUS might not enforce this or won't enforce this anyway, as if to say, well, it's okay that it's in here, we won't use it. And that's just insane. Just general, not legal advice from a not lawyer, although we'll have a lawyer on momentarily. You shouldn't, if you don't agree to something and the other party of the contract says, well, I'm not going to use that anyway, then the response should be then remove it. Because if it's there, it can be acted on. And the final point here from this original set of statements from ASUS was actually from LTT and also subsidiary channel Tech Linked, which both noted that this is all just boilerplate or something, where boilerplate is almost intended to be inferred by the audience as a dismissal of the severity of the language, as if to say, well, because it's boilerplate and it's copy-paste from everything, that means it's okay, or that means we don't intend to use it, or whatever the implication was there. We strongly disagree with that defense, and that's ASUS's apparently defense via Linus Media Group, and we further disagree with the lack of challenge to that defense. But the lawyer interview we're getting to momentarily, we'll talk about that, because it is an important point for you to understand as a consumer why just boilerplate means absolutely nothing. In fact, it really means you should pay more attention to it. Now, we emailed ASUS immediately following the WAN show. We asked them to confirm their statements because we were working off of another outlet reporting on what ASUS told them. ASUS did not confirm or deny the statements. It ignored the question, basically, and provided a new one instead. And so we're going to move on from that stuff. It looks like ASUS got the memo after the WAN show when we emailed them and said, this is a terrible statement to make, and they're starting to correct it. So let's go through that and give them some benefit of the doubt here to make a correction. So after pushing ASUS for a few weeks, they said this, quote, "We want to address the concerns that have been raised by our users about whether recent BIOS updates will impact the warranty of ASUS AM5 motherboards. We would like to reassure our customers that both beta and fully validated BIOS updates for ASUS AM5 boards are covered by original manufacturer's warranty. We would also like to confirm the following points. The ASUS AM5 motherboard warranty covers all AMD Expo, Intel XMP, and DOCP memory configurations. They also said all recent BIOS updates follow the latest AMD voltage guidelines for Ryzen 7000 processors. Furthermore, we would like to reiterate our commitment to supporting the AMD AM5 platform and our customers. For any further inquiries about your board, please contact us." Now, this was already an awesome move in the right direction, finally. A little bit of effort to get here, but we are giving them a lot of credit for this, because ASUS, and we're going to hold them to this, so if they don't follow this, please let us know immediately via team@gamersnexus.net. But ASUS is saying it is now functionally expanding its warranty coverage to explicitly include Expo and XMP. And they explicitly say that for the ASUS AM5 warranty. So it doesn't necessarily include the other product lines, but at least for this one, ASUS is including Expo and XMP, which is traditionally not covered. Not that it's really been enforced traditionally, but they could enforce it, and that's the point we were making earlier. So this is good. This is a great move in the right direction. ASUS stayed in touch with us after this. There must have been some kind of discussion internally where they had a major change of tone. Maybe PR finally won over legal or PMs or whatever it was, but someone decided to open up the door. So they provided another statement that was more in depth, and this is the important one. It states, quote, "As we finalize our internal review and root cause assessment, we want to provide a recap. 1, we completed an internal RCA and shared our findings with AMD. 2, we implemented a thermal mitigation function in our UEFI BIOS. Our commentary here, that's a major change, and that should more or less prevent the issue that we saw originally. 3, they said we implemented AMD's max SoC voltage guidance and have released UEFI BIOS updates with these implementations starting late April. We've also recently completed posting an all-new range of formal releases, which also contain AMD's 1007A AGESA. 4, we're working with channel partners and SIs to notify customers regarding their warranties and guidance relating to UEFI releases. And this is actually awesome if they're doing this. So hopefully not just through SIs, but through their own registered site. When you register for a warranty, they can do outreach. Realistically, it's very difficult for a company with the volume of ASUS to get in touch with everyone who's bought something, because they're selling through retailers, through distributors. They don't really know where the board ends up at the end of the day. But the fact that they're trying at all, and especially through SIs where the customer is far less likely to pay attention to media coverage online, this is a good move. This is what we want to see for issues where a part can die as a result of a failure that's a simple update away from being fixed. So that's good. And ASUS, thank you. good job on that. We're happy to give credit for that because that's what needs to happen and not many companies do it. They continue a bit, so they have a formal press release. They kind of recap those updates. They say, since the first report, we've issued guidance to define incoming service cases as high priority. They say on May 12th, they announced that customers with AM5 boards qualify for their premium program of service. And they also say they're working with retail partners to notify customers in addition to the SI, we mentioned. Additionally, ASUS removed the beta BIOS messaging, and it says it is now openly communicating that users are covered, which is true. We just read that statement. And they say they have some FAQ updates. So I would say this is what we wanted, and we're gonna mark this issue as resolved on our issue tracker website on gamers.nexus, although we don't know if it's been fully resolved for everybody. But at least on ASUS, we did some quick testing before I get on a plane here for Taiwan for Computex. But we did some quick testing, and it does look like at least VSOC has come down. So that's good. And we're probably not going to validate every vendor, but it looks like this matter is getting resolved certainly by AMD, and ASUS is taking the step they should, which is active outreach. And I mean, genuinely, we're really happy about that. It's a little tough because just the amount of difficulty to get here, where we had to have some very contentious email back and forth, some silence for a while, this big public blast on ASUS originally, and it's like now we get here. This is right. I mean, this is what they should have done. And the proper original statements were not to say, hit F5 and restore defaults on your $700 motherboard. By the way, we're a premium brand and we offer a premium experience unless you need support, in which case you're on your own, screw you. You know, that was kind of the vibe they were giving originally. And if you ask yourself, what are you paying for with a brand like ASUS? What you are paying for is the response in a crisis situation like this, or is the response when you have a component failure. That extra 10 to 20% on all their products over their competitors, it's to pay for a good service experience. So if you're a user who says, I don't want anything to go wrong, but if it does, I want it to be easy. That's what ASUS is trying to sell, but they were doing it without providing that part. So the sales pitch was there, but not the product, or in this case, the service. And we have more commentary on that confusing language in a moment. But that is not to take away from the fact that this is the correct response. And ASUS, please use these 10 bullet points as a template for your future problems, because you will have more. All companies do, and that's fine. It's how you handle it that matters. This handling is excellent, and we'd love to see this used as a template if it happens again. Okay, so with the new statements now out of the way and everyone being updated, we want to use this opportunity as an educational experience for us and for our viewers by bringing an attorney on the show to do a brief interview about some of your consumer protections. And our guest today has experience dealing with warranties and consumer protections and consumer matters, and can speak to some of ASUS's original motivations with that original language we found problematic, speak to the confusion that ASUS caused, whether intentional or not, in its multiple documents about warranties. And our guest will be taking the perspective of both ASUS to provide the why did they do this look, and of the consumer to provide the how do you fight this, or how do you protect yourself as a consumer look. And hopefully we can all take home some things to use in the future, if not for this specific scenario. Okay, so now we are joined by Vincent, and we're going to talk about some of the legal issues and the warranty stuff relating to all this. But Vincent, do you want to introduce yourself, what you do first?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Vincent Augusta. I'm an attorney licensed to practice law in the state of North Carolina. My practice does litigation. We do consumer protection, real estate transactions that involve warranty issues, and contract disputes generally. So
this is a high-level look at how the language is written, what maybe their intents were, and we're going to look at it kind of back and forth between, from ASUS's perspective, why might they do a thing, or a company in general, and from the consumer's perspective, how might you try to challenge that. Mm-hmm. But with anything that is a legal matter, as I was learning talking to Vincent before this, it's not necessarily cut and dry, which is why you have lawyers who represent you in a courtroom. So we're looking at the hypothetical situations to focus on the importance of wording and phrasing within a document. And obviously, if there were ever actually an issue that arises, most likely you don't sue a company over a product failure, but this will still explore some of the what-if scenarios.
Right.
So sent over a ton of information. Before getting into the specific questions, just in general, doing your initial research, looking at the manuals, terms of conditions, all that stuff, did you notice anything you want to bring up first?
Yeah, so the first thing that I noticed was that there seems to be a great deal of confusion with these documents. So the documents have nested references to other documents, and it makes it very difficult to follow. So, for example, the terms of service says that services don't have warranties, but services is defined as including products. Well, we know products have warranties because the motherboard has a warranty, but the motherboard warranty is invalid if it violates the user's manual. The user manual says that you're not supposed to change the BIOS, and the BIOS patch obviously does that. So it's very unclear to me how to resolve some of these vague terms.
So products are services in this case, or
according to the
services
terms of service, it defines services as including all products.
Okay. So then the motherboard is a service?
It's difficult. It's difficult to say.
All right. So vague versus broad. What is the difference, I guess, in maybe legal terminology?
So something that's broad is encompassing. It includes a lot of different things, but it can be very definitive. It can be very clear. Whereas something that's vague is it's unclear, and the lack of definitiveness of it makes it problematic for consumers to understand. So, for example, in this case, we have another issue of terminology, where there's kind of internal inconsistencies, where there's a term used in the warranty support page referred to as a limited warranty. But in the user's manual, it's referred to a commercial warranty. In the patch notes, it's referred to as a product warranty. And that creates kind of a difficulty and a vagueness, if you will, in that you're not really sure, do these terms all kind of mean the same thing? Or are they referencing different parts of things? And so it's not that it's broad, it's not that it encompasses more.
So what's an example of a broad statement in a legal document, I guess?
So a broad statement would be something like to the fullest extent of the law, right? Any and all issues shall be resolved under the laws of Texas, right? Forum clauses, things like that.
There were a couple responses. There's sort of the community response, commenters, and then there's additional media commentary on it. And ASUS, I think in talking to some of the other media outlets about this issue, just based on my experience being in media, the language I saw consistently come up was the phrase boilerplate, almost as if my perception of it was a dismissal of maybe the severity or the perceived severity of some of the language that was written, because like, oh, it's just boilerplate, that's on everything. And I saw that getting parroted in some of the comments too. And it's really, to me, it was really strange to see this. Suddenly there's this, it's boilerplate. That, I don't think that's a defense, but can we go over what boilerplate actually means?
Yeah, so boilerplate language is contract terms that are designed to be able to be applied to a variety of situations without having to adjust them for the specifics. So almost always they're going to be very generalized, very broad. And the idea is that you are kind of protecting the author of the document to the fullest extent of the law. But it doesn't affect its enforceability. Boilerplate language can be enforced and frequently is enforced. And in fact, there's some really interesting cases where language that is boilerplate language has been enforced in a way that you might think is unfair or unjust.
Any examples of that?
So there's a Supreme Court case about a cruise ship where basically people from Washington went to Florida to board the cruise ship, and the ticket said that all the issues that they have will be resolved in the state of Florida. And so after there was an issue on the ship and they wanted to sue this cruise line, the court said that they were forced to actually go all the way from Washington to Florida to resolve this issue, even though the language was very broad and boilerplate. If they choose to not enforce this versus them having kind of a legal entitlement to do so, you end up with this kind of Fairweather friend problem, where as long as everything is going well, the company isn't enforcing its terms, it's not enforcing its legal entitlements, but as soon as, for example, claims become too expensive or the number of claims becomes too numerous, then the company always has the option of going and kind of using this technical legal language to provide a defense against those claims.
Why might it be beneficial for the company beyond the obvious? Of course, there's the money aspect. What other aspects might they be looking at?
So a lot of this, having the option of kind of using that technical legal defense is a way of kind of deflecting larger, more problematic cases. Is that day by day, individual by individual, they can honor this warranty, or they can kind of do whatever repairs or replacements they deem necessary to maintain the value of the brand. But it becomes kind of an option that they have on the back end. If it becomes necessary for whatever reason, whether it is an issue of money or just an issue of larger liability, they're afraid that the kind of acknowledging certain things will cascade into other things. They always have that option to kind of use that legal barrier.
So if they choose to make case-by-case exceptions, does that affect ASUS's vulnerability in a class action?
Right, so it definitely affects class action vulnerability in terms of the deterrent effect. And so even if the legal arguments themselves aren't particularly robust, or even if it doesn't stop people from filing class actions, having the presence of some of this language that may lead people to believe that their warranty has been voided or that they've done something incorrect can have a deterrent effect, where consumers might feel as though they've already avoided their warranty. It's not worth bringing these claims. But it also affects attorneys. And so plaintiffs' attorneys may look at this language and they might say, I don't think I can bring this claim. It might be too costly to bring in, or it's the likelihood of success is less than what you would want. And so that's the presence of this language affects not only they have legal arguments, but it also affects the beginnings of these things.
Right. So if you are representing a client and they bring you a case about a product, and let's say the case is this expensive product, whatever, caught on fire, damaged several other components, the damages to me are approximately $5,000 or something like that.
Right.
And then you find out they agreed to install an update that included within that explicitly said your warranty is void if you install this update. How does that affect your approach with that client? What arguments might you make to say, no, actually it was not void, despite the page saying it will be void?
Well, you definitely, in a situation where you have conflicting documents, you have a product warranty and then you have a fix for a problem that has a warranty modification or something like that, I think the best argument is to attack the ambiguity of the situation. Is that when you have these kinds of agreements that corporations make and they give to consumers, there's an incredible power imbalance. Consumers don't contribute to these terms. They don't negotiate for certain parts of these contracts. And so frequently when there is ambiguity, the courts will interpret that ambiguity in a favorable way towards the consumer to address this power imbalance. The courts figure that because the corporations wrote the document, they should have to own the ambiguities. And so that seems to be the strongest argument for that kind of situation. And it makes sense intuitively, because if you think about the consumer is caught in this catch-22, where they have a problem with the product, and either they install the fix, which potentially modifies the warranty or voids the warranty and includes language they don't really understand, or they're using the product until the product fails.
Right.
And in which case the implication is the corporation comes back and says, why did you not adopt our fix? Why did you let this problem get that bad?
Sure.
You now have some sort of responsibility.
Right, okay, that makes sense too. Is there a point that a company has to perform any kind of active outreach about a problem? Just linking back to your statement about, the company may have this reaction of, well, why didn't you apply the fix? We made a fix.
Yeah.
So is there a point they have to do active outreach rather than just posting, say, on their support or download page where the user reasonably, once they've completed their build, will never return to?
Mm-hmm. There could be, in terms of limiting their liability, at some point it might be determined that they should have reached out or they should have done something more affirmative. But realistically, there's no legal obligation to do these things unless there's been some sort of court order, right, or some sort of judgment. And so, again, going back to this kind of idea of the voluntariness of this, but then you run into issues with if it's numerous or it's very expensive, then they can opt not to and kind of see how the chips fall later on down the road.
from ASUS's perspective, now that we know why they might have used some of that language initially, if you were a lawyer for ASUS or a company like them, why might you hesitate to release an updated statement?
Yeah, I think that the new statement creates kind of a legal obligation. It's a promise that moving forward, the consumers can kind of rely on, and so I would be hesitant because it creates that obligation for the company. Previously, if you have these kind of vague and ambiguous terms, or you have this boilerplate language that kind of attempts to be very general, the difficulty then is that you don't have that option anymore. And again, if that's what the corporation intended to, is to remove themselves from having that option, then that's fine. But from a legal perspective, it takes away one of their tools moving forward.
Right. So even if, back to that earlier question, even if they planned or intended to case by case for all cases resolve the issue, if something goes south at some point, the difference is clear, where now you can't say, okay, you can't have the head of the RMA department say, we're bleeding too much money.
Yeah.
We're going to go back to rejecting more of these because we can. So that makes sense. So then next one's a more specific targeted legal question about this, where with the understanding, of course, that just to frame it, it would be a PR nightmare at this point for ASUS to reject anyone's claims, especially relating to this issue. And knowing realistically they probably will not now, but just purely technically in the legal sense, if a user has previously downloaded that BIOS with the old terms there, does the new statement that ASUS issued at this point reinstate the old terms or eliminate the agreement that the user had of voiding their BIOS under the conditions laid out? In other words, are they free from that voiding language previously if they downloaded the BIOS?
Probably not. And the reason being that when you have a contract and you want to modify that contract, you need additional consideration. You need something of value to bargain for that exchange. The fact that moving forward, there's a statement about how to interpret this contract doesn't really impact the original bargain for agreement. And you would likely need additional consideration to change those terms.
Okay.
None of it's necessary because of waiver, right? Is that you can voluntarily waive a legal entitlement that you have under a contract. And so if ASUS chooses to not enforce that those other terms, and if even if there was a determination that those terms meant something restrictive for the consumer, since ASUS is the one who is benefiting from that, they can always just choose not to enforce those terms.
Another thing I've noticed a lot in legal discussion is the concept of admission of guilt or fault. You see this a lot with speeding tickets, right? Like, do you know why I pulled you over? Yes, I was speeding. Like, okay, well, that one was easy.
Yeah. Not a good choice.
Right. From the client's perspective, or maybe from the representative of the client's perspective, the lawyer's perspective, is this new statement from ASUS where they're effectively saying, we cover you under XYZ reasons. Technically, they did not say, we cover you under XYZ reasons because we were wrong or anything like that. But is this something that could be seen as an admission of fault or error? Or does this new statement in any meaningful way sort of hurt a hypothetical defense?
I think it certainly does. And so far as we talked about before, you're now creating a legal obligation. And so talking about kind of fault is you're voluntarily accepting fault with this statement by kind of saying, we're going to cover these things. We are reassuring, right? That word
That's
that they
right,
use.
yeah.
Reassuring, kind of indicating, at least to some degree, that it's likely they intended this to be the case all along. And so they are voluntarily creating a legal obligation that, I guess, in a way, kind of establishes maybe not so much an error, but a correction.
Right, or clarification, I guess, if you're on their side, yeah. So then, bringing it back to reality, what is a take-home message you might have for consumers in general here, where as a consumer, I think a lot of times, my feeling on it is you are effectively forced into accepting whatever the terms are because you want to use the software, you agree to the terms and conditions, right? You want to use the website, you are implicitly agreeing to it. And There's not really a lot you can do other than not use the thing or not buy the thing, but realistically, wherever you go instead will also have a similar requirement.
Right.
It's like buying a product, you're going to agree to things that probably their competitors also make you agree to. So to bring it back down to earth then for people, I mean, do you suddenly need to start reading the iTunes 47,000 page EULA when you agree to use it?
I think the take home is primarily that the language does matter. And so although reading the next significantly long end user agreement might not give you much more clarity on some of the things, it can be helpful in terms of understanding the intentions or the trustworthiness of the company that you're working with. So if you find that these terms are clear, if they're concise, if they're definitive, right? If they offer protections, then it seems as though the company is intending to be transparent. They're intending to communicate well and have a mutual understanding, and that means something, right? And in a world where we have race to the bottom end user agreements, where everything is getting increasingly more complicated and increasingly more confusing, having companies and rewarding companies for being transparent and being clear seems like a kind of an active thing that consumers can do.
Right, yeah. So looking for clear writing.
Right, and writing that you understand, that communicates clearly to you, that you understand what the definitive legal entitlements that you have are.
All right, well, thank you for joining for all of this and hopefully giving people a little bit more idea of what some of their protections might be, or at least how to approach buying a product and trying to make sure you're protected as much as you can. There's definitely some brand credibility stuff to look for just for people in our audience. Noctua, as a good example, does this where they're pretty clear with what they cover, and Arctic has done this, Fractal has done it. So a lot of these, and this is maybe something you might have a comment on, but I've noticed anecdotally a lot of these smaller companies seem to be more forward with more consumer-friendly policies.
Because they're smaller companies, they may just intend to offer more robust policies and more robust warranties. It also may be that that was seen as a competitive advantage, is that if we offer more robust warranty options, that will attract consumers to us as opposed to other companies, which kind of, circling back, is kind of one of the primary takeaways from a situation like this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. From a larger company perspective where you have shareholders to please, I think a lot of times they win. So anyway, thank you for joining me. Much appreciated.
My pleasure, Steve. Thanks for having me.
And we'll get back to the rest. So that's it then. ASUS positions itself as top of market with quality, and the reality is that a lot of times they are marginally better than competitors. Better nonetheless in some cases, but it may not be significant to justify that cost if they are not supporting their products. And it appears, based on these new statements, that perhaps someone at ASUS has gotten through and said, why is it we exist again at our price point? Oh yeah, it's so we can make sure this is handled right when there's a problem. So if you have a problem with ASUS at this point, please reach out to us because we want to look into it. But for now, we're satisfied with the new statements. I'm happy to see they're doing active outreach. I'm happy to see they've extended the Expo and XMP coverage beyond what was even originally offered, and that they've removed the warranty void statements. And it is our belief that ASUS is moving in the right direction regardless of what their unstated intentions might be. And for those unstated intentions, the only thing we can do is continue to watch and follow up if anything changes. With regard to the media positivity statement, we did ask ASUS about it. They said that they take the matter very seriously and are conducting an internal investigation. So without being cynical about that, we'll see what the result is. Certainly we'll know if the people who disseminate that mentality are removed. So regardless of the outcome, not that we've sold ads recently to them, nor were we trying to, but we will continue to not try to sell ads to ASUS because, as stated earlier, this does sort of render them persona non grata as far as we're concerned for advertising. So that's it for this one. We'll let you all know if that changes. Thanks for watching. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to grab a shirt like this one to support us directly and our reporting. And go to patreon.com/gamersnexus if you want to kick a few bucks our way, or you can use super thanks below. And we'll see you all next time.